The Witcher 3 is one of the most acclaimed and successful video games in the history of the medium. That success was down to several different factors, including the gameplay and the gameplay systems, the grandiose and intriguing stories, and the way those specific stories were told. The grounded world and the atmosphere of the game, the fact that it was the third game in a trilogy where the previous two entries were also highly acclaimed and successful, and the franchise has already had an established fanbase, not just in the video game front, but also in the form of books, as the series was started in the form of that medium. In this video, I would like to go into detail with some of these aspects and point out why the game was and still is successful and what the games industry gets wrong about these elements of The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3 was a part of an already established franchise with several books and games, which are highly acclaimed, which signals you, the consumer, a certain sense of security with your purchase, as there is an already established and most importantly positive track record coming from the way of the franchise itself. The story of The Witcher 3 is a continuation, if a loose one, of the previous two stories, with the same protagonists as in Geralt, with a cast of familiar characters such as Dandelion, Zoltan, Triss, Roach, Werner Roach, that is, and so on. The main plot of the game, as there is a certain epicness to it, while subsequently being a personal story about Geralt and Ciri and their relationship. The story is scripted, but the player can make choices which fit the profile of Geralt as a Witcher, that ranging from basic dialogue options to options which affect the outcome of the situation, or choices that can have unforeseen consequences later down the line. Choices which may seem small and insignificant can have rather grand effects, not just on Geralt, but also on the player as well. The main story of the game is epic and grandiose, not just in scale, but also in length, as the story warrants that very length. People don't necessarily like The Witcher because it is a long game. They like it rather because the time they spend with the game is a quality time, as the story and the game respect the player and their time. Many games fell into the trap of making their stories and game worlds huge in order to make it more appealing to a more general audience, even to the detriment of the franchise that particular game is set in. My main examples being Assassin's Creed Origins and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, while on the other hand, games such as Horizon Zero Dawn has managed to tell a compelling narrative in a relatively small open world space, showcasing that bigger isn't always better. When it comes to the Witcher 3 story, however, it doesn't feel as fractured to the player as it really is, as the player is constantly presented with visual images and voiceovers of what has happened previously in the story, what the next objective is, and why they are going there, all that during loading screens. Now, when it comes to side stories and side quests, some of these have the same amount of care and attention, or even in some cases even more than the main story of the game itself, my main example being the Bloody Baron arc. Even these side narratives are compelling and always present interesting ideas or concepts for a player to think about, but the game doesn't always give an answer for the dilemmas that it presents the player. Even though the game is set in a fantasy setting, which takes inspiration from the European Middle Ages, the world still manages to feel real, grounded and organic, partly because the player is put into these grounded and real situations where they have to make a certain choice, which they have to carry with themselves until the end of the game. Side narratives in The Witcher 3 were always optional, but the player is compelled to do them for some reason. The side content in the game ranges from very simple and quick quests to whole story arcs, which can have damning effects on the world and the story. Open world games have taken the approach of quantity over quality in that department, presenting side quests as tasks, much like an MMORPG would, rather than creating intriguing stories with gripping characters which the player would like to engage in, not just to gain a few experience points, but for the thrill of discovering something new and unique. Also, side quests are supposed to expand the world and further build upon it. The world of The Witcher 3 is not just a huge open world playground to explore, but it is also filled with rather quality content, which further engages the player to spend more time in the environment and explore every nook and cranny of it. The world and its inhabitants are interesting, and not just copy-pasted NPCs and buildings to fill a certain quota about the game's size. The environments feel real and lived in, with characters who rather resemble actual people than just two-dimensional video game characters, in that they have personalities, have different routines, and react to the player and the player's actions in various ways. These aspects also build a certain atmosphere for the game, which further immerses the player in the world. This again, on a surface level, can lead to the conclusion that players spend time with the game because the world is huge and there is a lot to do, which is a rather shallow and superficial conclusion, as if the world and its characters and quests are not of interest to the player, but is only done for the sake of clearing a map marker or wanting to reach a higher level. Then that engagement is only a surface level one, which the player will stop caring about right after they have reached their new level and have received their dopamine hit alongside it. Maybe the least interesting aspect of The Witcher 3's success is its gameplay, as the combat was never really a focus for RPG games, although the game has managed to deliver an interesting combat system which was heavily inspired by the Dark Souls series, which focuses on mainly silver and steel swords, while including Witcher signs as well, which can be utilized during or outside of combat. As the player is a Witcher, the opponents include humans, non-humans, and also monsters as well, which most of the time require some special treatment in either the form of signs or in the form of bombs and oils, although the latter are only required in higher difficulties. Another gameplay element that is worth examining is the minigame called Gwent, which is a card game where the characters of the world of the Witcher have their very own card and can be collected throughout the world, either by buying them from merchants or acquiring them from certain card players. A match of Gwent isn't necessarily a long one, taking between 3 to 5 minutes to complete. Nevertheless, they are an incredibly engaging and fun addition to the game, while building off the game's existing lore and characters, making the player learn more about the world as he or she plays a round of Gwent. Many open-world games ever since then were inspired by the Dark Souls combat system, although not many have managed to integrate it into their world as The Witcher 3 did, as the gameplay is focused around the Witcher's combat skills and abilities. When it comes to the characters, all of these characters that are present in the game, who are involved either in the main story or any side stories such as the Bloody Baron arc, have a distinctive personality which the player can remember the character or the quest they are given by that very character. People and players attach themselves to characters more than anything, as we identify with the struggles the characters face and particularly how they deal with those certain struggles, creating a bond in the process between player and the character within the game. The characters and quests are all memorable, as the quests the player does with them are personal for these specific characters, be that rescuing mages from Novigrad with Triss, helping Yennefer break a Jinn spell over Geralt and herself to find out if their love is real or not, and to help our great friend Dandelion in aiding her muse, which ends up being something way bigger than initially thought. All in all, The Witcher 3's success was down to the fact that rather aiming for quantity in the form of the length of the story, having numerous characters, side activities, and the size of the map, the passionate developers of CD Projekt Red took a shot at creating a game with the primary focus of delivering a high-quality story with an interesting and diverse cast of characters and side activities, while also respecting the player and the player's time alongside it, which resulted in one of the most highly acclaimed and beloved games ever made. Thank you so much for watching this video. But what do you think? What kind of lessons do you think future open world games should learn from The Witcher 3? If you have enjoyed the video, please leave a like as it helps out the channel a great deal, and subscribe for more content like this one. See you in the next one, and remember to keep it insightful.